Team, welcome to another episode of Ask Top, sponsored by MentorMilitary.com. Today we have the honor and privilege of speaking with someone that was a personal mentor of mine, Command Sergeant Major retired Troy Welch. He was my CSM at the 19th in Korea and went on to become the 8th Army Command Sergeant Major over all forces in Korea and ended his career as the G4 Sergeant Major of the Army, basically in charge of all things logistics for the Army. I learned a lot from Sergeant Major, and it is my hope that you walk away today with a valuable information that will make you a better leader. If you find value in today's discussion, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, leave us a like, give us a comment about today's show or a subject you'd like us to cover in the future. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and get after it. Welcome, Sergeant Major. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Sergeant Major. Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey, looking forward to this. We've been in contact a few times since I got out, but there's always wisdom and lesson learned from old guys like us, and it's time to tell a few war stories today.
All right.
So,
the adoptive word.
Yeah. All right. So let's start with one that was near and dear to me. While we were in Korea, I was very interested and eager to become a brigade or group sergeant major. You and I had a rather frank discussion on the subject, and you realistically told me I didn't have enough time as a battalion command sergeant major, which was a true statement. I just didn't want to hear that at the time. But you told me to grow where I was planted. And when I got off the phone, I took that statement to heart. I know what it meant to me, what that statement meant and how it impacted me, but explain this philosophy from your perspective.
Well, I have to date that back a few years. Anybody who knows my background, like you do, Mark, I came up in the Army as a food service specialist, a cook. And so over that course of time, I have been taken in and out of my MOS for various different things. And I had concerns about that because I wasn't working within my MOS and I wasn't sure how that was going to, be received by those who were reviewing my glide path, if you will. And it wasn't until a battalion commander of mine one day, because we got on this discussion, not necessarily about me at the time, but about other folks who were, to give you a little background, we were being caught up in the drawdown in Germany.
Yep,
and so you had a lot of folks who were working in areas that weren't necessarily their MOS, right? And so that became a topic of discussion. And he's the one that looked at me one day and says, you know what, I was the acting sergeant major at the time. I was a master sergeant. He says, you know what, Sergeant Major? He said, there's an old saying, he says, I don't know where it came from, but it's, bloom where you're planted, right? And I heard him say that. I said, that's a pretty good philosophy, And so when I would go out and talk to the soldiers and you'd get that sense of angst, right, that they weren't comfortable not working in their MOS. They thought it would hold up their promotions and all that. So I took that statement that he said. Now, he didn't say much beyond that, just bloom where you're planted. So I kind of developed my own philosophy around that. I would sit him down and I'd say, well, I said, a wise person once told me, bloom where you're planted. Let me tell you what that means to me. No matter what you're doing in life in your career, I mean, sometimes the Army is going to yank you out of one spot and put you where you're needed, right? It may not be what you want to do, but it's something that the Army at the time needs you to do. So the best thing you can do is bloom where you're planted, kind of grow where you're at. And how do you do that? Well, I don't care if you're slinging a mop or if you're taking a picture, or if you're flipping eggs somewhere or whatever it is that you're doing, do it to the best of your ability. Be the best at what you're doing because that will reflect, and especially if you're a non-commissioned officer, your NCOER is going to reflect that. It's going to show that you were taken from what your normal, typical duties would be in your MOS, but you were put in somewhere else and you grew there and you performed it very, very well. And therefore you bloom where you're planted and you're going to get promoted because you did very well at what you've done. So I've kind of taken that from that point on and throughout the rest of my career when I would talk to people that, were even in spots, and we'll go back to the discussion you and I had, it's, have you fully bloomed where you were planted? Well, at the time, I thought a little growth was needed, right? That you needed to have a little bit more growth. And so it doesn't necessarily translate to somebody who's not working in their MOS, although it kind of originated there for me. I took it beyond that to even to what you're currently doing, right? Even in your own MOS, right? You still need to grow, right? You still don't take being passed over for a promotion as something negative. Take a good hard look at yourself and find out and ask yourself that question. Have you truly grown where you're at, right? Have you done everything that you need to do to get promoted? If you haven't, then you need to focus on that and continue to grow. And eventually you'll be recognized for that, and you'll get promoted, and you're going to go on and do great things as long as you keep your head down and do what you're supposed to do. But you gotta fully develop a good understanding of what it is that you're doing and be very good at what you're doing. And then the Army looks at you for that potential to do that in the next higher grade. And I think once people understood that, and you explain it that way, it resonates, and they take a good hard look and say, you're either going to agree with me or not, but, hopefully you do, and you continue to grow, and, you'll be recognized for that. My nephew is struggling with that right now. I mean, he's a sergeant first class, right? And hasn't made E8, and he talks to me about it quite often. And I keep telling him, I said, you're doing all the right things. Just be patient, right? Continue to grow, and you'll get picked up. You've only been looked at once, I think maybe once below zone, once when he was in the zone. I said, now they're restructuring things. I said, you'll get recognized. I said, you'll make E8. And then if you stick around long enough, I'm sure you'll make a good sergeant major someday. But it's just, you can't get discouraged with yourself, right? You just got to keep striving and keep growing. And I think the end result will be something there, but that you'll be happy with. You just kind of continue to bloom, if you will.
Well, in my case, when I hung up the phone, and you could tell when I hung up the phone, I was not a happy camper.
No.
And but I got to thinking about that, and one of the things I reflected on was throughout my career, I was always pulled out to go fix things, and a lot of times I wasn't in my MOS, and I realized that I got put there for a reason, and basically Sergeant Major Welch told me to shut up and color. And it was time to shut up and color. So, but I learned a lot there. And that was probably my biggest point in my career for leadership challenges. And I was surrounded by some senior NCOs that helped. And I learned a lot from there that I could go on and share with other people. So,
well, that's what you hope, right? I mean, you hope as a leader that what you instill in somebody else, right? Whether it be a subordinate or a peer or even a superior, right? That you leave your mark, and you hope you leave your mark in a good way, right? And that the future of the Army is going to be in good hands from your foxhole, right?
Right.
Everything that you've done and everything that you've achieved yourself, Mark, and what you've accomplished, you kind of got to look back and say, well, I think when I left the Army, I think I left it in good hands because I tried to share everything that I was taught with that next generation of soldier, and who subsequently now is teaching somebody else, right? So you gotta hope that there's that trickle down effect, right? That a piece of your leadership philosophy or how you trained or how you coached or how you mentored somebody, it continues to be passed on, right? And you hope not only to be passed on, but even developed to even be something better, right?
Right.
Than what you planted, right? The seed you planted. You kind of hope that person takes it and waters it and it grows and then develops something of their own, right? But a piece of you is there. And so that's all you can hope for, right? Is that everything that you try to instill with those within your charge or those who you work for, that they continue to pass that on. I mean, I think that's probably one of the best legacies any soldier could leave, right? Is that you left the Army in good standing and that you hoped that the people you trained and taught will do the same thing.
All right, question number 2. As a leader, what was the biggest failure that you had and what did you learn from it?
Many. But I tell you, I think the one in my own, when I first read that, I really had to do some soul searching to think, because I mean, you don't learn if you don't fail, right? So there's been failures along the way. But I think the biggest one that really hit me was I failed to do what I instilled my soldiers to do, and that was to create a home and work-life balance, right?
Yeah.
And to, invest in themselves, whether it be education and that, but figure out that good home and work-life balance. And I was a failure at that, and I know I was.
I think I'm in that club.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm scared to even think about how much leave I lost because there was never a good time, right? So I don't think I did a very good job, but I think I did a good job in trying to instill that to the soldiers, but I didn't do a very good job of following my own advice, right? So I think that ranks up there pretty high with, in my eyes, as a failure, because as a leader, you have to lead by that example, right? And if they don't see you taking leave, or if they don't see you spending time with your family, then you kind of instilled in them, well, that's just how we do it if we want to be at that level, right? So that's a totally wrong message to send, And I always had an excuse as to why I couldn't take the leave, or why I couldn't do this, or why I couldn't do that. I mean, there was never a good time. Well, there's never going to be a good time. You just got to make the time, right? And I didn't do that. And it bothers me today, to be quite honest with you, right? Because I look back at the time that I lost, not going home and seeing my kids or my parents, or not spending that valuable time with my wife. I mean, for crying out loud, we had to coordinate. I'd come back to D.C. for something, and Deb would be back in Dallas or down in Dallas doing something for AFES. And we actually one time worked out a time where we could meet up in not Reno, but Lake Tahoe. And we spent the weekend there in Lake Tahoe, and then we drove into Sacramento and spent a few days with my parents, and then back to the peninsula we went. But that was always from the time we got married back in the 80s to up until I retired, right? It was, I never, and God bless Debbie for never, holding that over me, right? She wasn't happy, and especially when she heard the amount of leave I lost, she was not thrilled with me, but I think part of her understood, right, that it was not so much I was putting the soldiers before her, but I was putting them before me, right? And in essence, I was putting them before me and her, right? That's what I did.
Well, we were both fortunate that we had awesome wives.
Yeah,
Stood beside us.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that I wouldn't have made it to where I did without her, right? There's no question that I wouldn't have. So I look at that as a failure, and there's many more examples I could give you, but if I had to send one message out there to your listeners, it would be, if you're serving on active duty and you have a family, whether you're married or not, you got to figure out a way to carve that time out. One, for your own sanity, but for two, you just need to maintain that connection and make time for yourself and your family. Because if you don't, then you'd be like me one day looking back on it going, man, I wish I would have just taken some time, and carved out that time and created a better work and home life balance. So that probably sounds kind of cheesy and kind of, well, I'm sure there's other failures out there, and there are, and I'll give you another one if we have time. I regret not making a better connection, and I won't name the leader's name, but with a certain commander that I served with, right? That it wasn't hostile by any means, but we just never clicked, right? And I look back on that as I failed there not to put more energy into it to make that a better working relationship. We never went out and beat on a different drum, but we never had that closeness that you'd want with, as a senior enlisted advisor to any commander, right? Whether it's a company commander or all the way up to a 4-star, right? You want to make sure that you have a good working relationship. And, I think I probably could have done better at that. And I think it might have made in my opinion, maybe a little less tense work environment had I tried a little harder, right?
Yeah.
But and that road travels both ways. Let's make no mistake about that. But I regret that because I often wonder, if I look back on it, did I let that affect me in some of the things that I did? As much as I may have tried not to, did it? Did I allow that to impact some of the things that I may have done? So it's a combination of those, right? Home life, and then you got to make your work life work too, right? And it takes like any marriage, right? It takes work.
Absolutely.
It takes a lot of work. Yeah, so
a little bit easier question, more upbeat. If you had to pick one item or one situation, what would be your greatest achievement, and why is it your greatest achievement?
As much as I would love to say it was making first sergeant, although that was a great achievement, I have to say making CSM. Because as a cook, that was unheard of.
Roger.
Right? It just wasn't there. I watched for years, from the time I made sergeant first class, to be quite honest, every time the CSM list would come out, the CSMD list come out, I would look to see if there was any 92 golf out there who got picked up for CSM. Goose egg, goose egg, goose egg, goose egg, goose egg. Getting picked for sergeant major, but not one was picked up for CSM. So, I made master sergeant, and I'm continuing to watch. Me and one other, he's a friend of mine, we were both watching, unbeknownst to one another, right? And so one day, we come back for a conference at Fort Lee again, and we're asking our regimental sergeant major, saying, why are all of the 92 series, mainly your logistics guys, right? Those who worked in the S4s and the G4s, they're getting picked up for CSM, but not one 92 golf is being picked up, right? And we're all supposed to be in the same pool being looked at, but we are never, ever considered to be a CSM. Why is that? And it was, well, it's the way your NCOERs are written, or it's, well, you don't have any leadership stuff. And I'm looking at him going, are you kidding me? So as a master sergeant, right, we're running a brigade consolidated dining hall, and in my case, at one point in time, I had 110 cooks. Not to mention all the civilians we were working with. The S4 had 4 people. Who's managing more people, right? You know, how can you say that this one person, I have a platoon full of cooks, has more leadership qualities than, say, a 92 Golf who's running a dining hall, right? Whether it's an E7 or an E8 as you work your way up. I said, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life, you know. We have to make sure they're qualified with the weapon. We have to make sure they can pass a physical fitness test. We have to make sure that they can do all their, at the time, CTT training, right? You know, we got to make sure they get to schools. We got to make sure everything anybody else has to do. What do you think? It doesn't exist in the dining hall? It does exist. We have to do all that, right? You know. So, and you and I talked earlier before we went live on this thing. Remember what I said? You know, be careful what you ask for.
Yep.
Yeah. Well. So when I got picked up for Sergeant Major, I mean, I was thrilled, right? You know, I made Sergeant Major. I'm in the academy, and we're still beating up on our regimental guys, saying, you know, this has got to change, right? You know, I get sent to Hawaii out of the academy. I get there in July of 2000, I believe it was, or 90. No, I'm sorry, it was in July of 98. And here it is, comes December, the list comes out, right? The CSM list, right? And lo and behold, I'm on it, number 1, and my buddy that I was speaking about earlier, number 2. 2 of us got picked up. And because I was number 1, now he was in Alaska and I was in Hawaii, they call up and Branch says, we have a battalion for you. It's in Alaska. And I said, well, Kevin, you know, my buddy's up there, right? Why don't you just let him have it? Well, you have to turn it down because you're number 1. And if you turn it down, we don't know when you're going to get another opportunity. I said, well, I understand that, but it's the right thing to do. He's already there, right? I mean, I could be that guy and say, sorry, Kevin, I'm coming to Alaska and I'm going to take that battalion away from you, right? You know, not that it was his for me to take away from, but in my mind, it was his, right? I mean, he was there, right? You know, so I said, I understand, and I'm going to yield that to Kevin, let him have it. So he gets it. Well, as it turns out, again, it's one of those things that you just don't know what's going on behind the scenes, right? But they were already looking at a Sergeant Major in the 45th Corps Support Group who was going to be removed from that position. And I didn't know. Why would I know, right? You know, and so the Group Sergeant Major came over and sat down and talked to me in my office as I was a Division Food Service Sergeant Major at the time in Hawaii. And he came over and talked to me. He says, hey, look, I know you're on the CSMD list. Would you like to take a battalion here? Now, I'm thinking I'm not going to see a battalion for who knows how long, right?
Right.
You know, turn that one down. And he said there's a situation happening, and there's going to be the 19th. There's going to be a battalion open up 45th Corps Support Group. And I said, not 19th, but 17th CSB. I said, awesome, I'll take it. Right? So Kevin stays in Alaska, works out. I end up getting the battalion in Hawaii. And I got to tell you, to get that was in my mind, right? Here I am, this cook, who worked my way to Sergeant Major, been yanked out a couple times to be a first sergeant here and there. Never at Fort Lee, mind you. Once was in Hawaii, in Germany, and the other one was in an air defense artillery battalion.
Lord have mercy.
They wanted me to be the headquarters battery first sergeant. In an 88 unit, you know. But anyway, so to get selected for not only for those jobs, but to then make CSM, to me was like, wow. You know, we really did this. We actually, I don't want to say broke down a barrier, because I'm sure somewhere along the lines before me, there probably was, a cook somewhere who had made CSM. I just never could believe that this just never happened. It just never happened in my time, right?
Right.
You know, if there was one out there, I didn't know who it was, you know. So to be able to not only make Sergeant Major, which is a big deal, but then to get to make CSM, oh my God, and then get a battalion. Wow. That to me was, I had achieved a goal that I wanted to achieve for myself, and that was to become a CSM, right? To do what they said we could not do,
Right.
right? There were opinions out there that we were just not leaders, that we were just cooks, you're just this, you're anything but a leader, but you could cook a damn good egg, right? So to prove that wrong, and again, be careful what you ask for, because now you're under a microscope.
Yep.
Now you're under a microscope to see, you know, what this cook is going to do, right? I'll never forget my first flying V out there at the division parade field in Hawaii as a battalion sergeant major, right? They rotated it around, right? You had to do a retreat ceremony. They called it a flying V. Well, I was up, and my wife is in the stands, there with my commander, and you got the leadership there, and you got all these infantry sergeant majors rumbling back around. Well, let's see what this cook has, right? You know, and I knew all of them. I knew them all before I became a CSM because I looked at their defects, right? So I knew all of them, right? And when it went off without a hitch, they were like, "Not bad, cook, not bad," you know. So you kind of earned that little bit of respect from these infantry and artillery guys, right? You know, and so you kind of from that point on, you felt part of the group, right? You know, that you weren't that, he's just a cook, right? You know, so yeah. Now, admittedly so, the soldiers in my unit probably were sick of being drilled and rehearsed and everything else to make sure that we did this perfectly, right? You know, but having said all that, it's probably a longer answer than you wanted, but I have to say that being a CSM, and then now it's commonplace, right? I feel pretty good about that. You know, I have to say that other than my kids and my wife and all that, I have to say that professionally, that to me, becoming a battalion sergeant major as a CSM, not as an acting guy, but as a CSM, was a pretty good achievement for the food service world, right? And so.
Well, you went on to become a command sergeant major of a lot more than a battalion.
Yeah, but you have to understand that when you're being told no, I mean, it'll never happen, and then to have I could have retired right then and there and be happy, right? And I think I would suspect if you was to talk to my buddy, he would probably tell you the same thing, right? That we, in our minds, had achieved what we had set out to achieve professionally, right? Is to prove the community wrong that a cook could be a CSM and do very well at it, you know. And it not comes without work of it, like anything else, right? You still have to put the effort in, and you still have to do all the things that you're supposed to do to be successful at it, because the minute you don't, then all you're doing is proving them right. See, I told you they couldn't do it.
Well, you know, you're right. I look back to my time in the field artillery, and, you know, they were cooks. And you never looked at them as, well, they're pretty much running a platoon.
Yeah.
And,
we weren't soldiers, we were cooks.
I remember a couple damn good ones, man. Colette, man, he made sure we had pastries and eggs to order. But I look back on it, and I never thought of them as leaders.
Yeah. Nobody, and you're not alone, right? You're not alone. I went back, and I sat down all the sergeant first classes at the time when I was a master sergeant, and I said, listen here, we're going to change. I went down to set with the brigade sergeant major. I said, I'm changing their NCOER. I said, I'm not going to call them a shift leader. I am going to call them a platoon sergeant. And he agreed. He said, I said, they're in fact managing a platoon of people.
Roger.
Right? I said, doesn't matter what MOS they are.
And that's what the evaluation board understands. Squad leader, platoon sergeant, first sergeant.
Exactly right. They don't understand. I mean, I get it, the cooks that are looking at the packets, right? The sergeant majors that are there that grew up in the quartermaster area or the chemical, because the quartermaster and chemical boards were combined. If you know anything about a cook, you understand what a shift leader is. You understand what a dynasty manager is. But platoon sergeant or squad leader resonates more.
Roger.
Right? Because that's, when you look at that glide path, it's not on there shift leader anywhere. It's platoon sergeant, squad leader, whatever, right? There's nothing in there that talks about being a shift leader or a supply room manager or a MTOE, what they called it, what the
right.
Kitchen equipment was that, right? Supervisor, right? That was all foreign language, but you understood squad leader, you understood platoon sergeant, right? You understood that. So we changed, well, at least I did, right? And I think, and I hope, and I think the people that followed me that I did that with, I hope they kept that up, right? But I switched how I was going to rate them. And I gave them the titles that would resonate. And then, of course, in their job description, I laid it out. They were a shift supervisor of X number of people, but their title I gave them was platoon sergeant or squad leader.
Yeah.
And I think you had to change the dynamic of how people looked at it. So, yeah, getting that battalion as a CSM, I mean, I was on the moon, right? You couldn't, yeah.
When you were 19th TSC Sergeant Major, I walked in your office one day, and I'll never forget this. The thing that really stuck out at me was when I looked at your inboxes, and it said, prep, cooked, and done.
Yeah.
I was like, he's a cook.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah.
All right, let's look at the next one. If you could go back and change one thing in your career, what would it be?
I have no regrets. So, what would I change? I thought about this and I gave it I really struggle with this because I'm not sure what I would have changed. Would I have approached something differently maybe? That might be a better answer. But I guess if there was something that I could have changed, but I was never given the opportunity, is I was never assigned to Fort Lee, right? And prior to my days of becoming a sergeant major, I really wanted to go to Fort Lee because I thought that the knowledge that I had from being in an operational army for so long, that I could go back and I could help change the way we train and the equipment that we use for our food service personnel, right? Mainly working in the field. So I think I thought about this. If there's something that could have changed, is maybe I would have fought harder to get there. Not that anybody would have listened to me, but in my mind, I really thought I could go there and maybe have an impact, right, on how we're looked at as a soldier, for one, how we train, and the equipment we have. I always thought, Mark, and I say this to this day, I always would argue whenever I'd go back to Fort Lee for any kind of accomplishment thing, I would ask them, why in the world are we still, at the time, still washing dishes out of a 32-gallon trash can? Why in the world are we still working out of a tent or some sort of a pop-up tent on what you call a mobile kitchen trailer, right?
Right.
why in the world don't we have a truly mobilized kitchen, right? That has fully self-contained. It's on the back of a head, be in a container, be whatever it could be, but you could have everything you wanted in there, and that would truly be a mobilized kitchen, right? With sinks in there. You could hook it up to a water. I mean, you could, I said, industry has them all over the place, right? Why are we still doing this? And the answer would always come back, well, you got the sanitized kitchen, or you got this, we got the MKT. I said, all you've done is taken us from maybe one or two prime movers to three or four of them hauling more junk out there to the field. I don't call that improvement. I just call that adding, you're pouring good money after bad, right? And if there's any food service people out there of my era listen to this, they're probably going to be going, he's a jackass, excuse my language. You know what I'm saying? Why is he saying that? Because that's how I felt. And I just thought we were not doing right by, I made one comment one time. I said, you got a kid who could put a helmet on at Fort Benning, Georgia, and talk to somebody in Afghanistan, but we can't figure out how to get pots and pans clean without using a 32-gallon trash can and an immersion heater. Seriously? You know, I mean, so I don't know. I think if I could change one thing, I think I'd probably go back and really push hard to be a stronger, more louder advocate for my MOS, right? And the things that I think that we could have made better, and maybe change how our Army society looked at us, right? Because I would always tell my cooks, you're a soldier first, you're a cook second, right? Never forget that. I don't care if anybody tells you you're a soldier, right? Above anything else, you're a soldier. And therefore, we must conduct ourselves as one, right? So you got to do the PT test. You got to do PT. I want you to go to school. I want you to do well in your weapons call. I want you to do well in everything that you do, right? You got to leave your mark. You're a soldier, right? And I think, and I hope, and I pray now that I think the food service specialists are getting a little bit more love these days, right? Now they wear chef smocks instead of whites, right? Their titles are different, right? They're calling the dining hall something a little bit different now. And I think, and quite frankly, I think all the cooking shows on TV have brought new light to what a food service person can do in the military, right? So I see all this as goodness, right? I think it's great the way they're taking it. I just think it took us too long to get there. And so if I had one change that I could make, and again, I'm just one person, and maybe I'm not trying to say that I'm that person that would have made all those changes, but I can say for sure I'm that person that would have went back and made a lot of noise. Whether they listen to me or not, I think I would have been beating that drum for the cooks, right, at Fort Lee.
Well, I haven't shared this with you, but, when I got out, I was going to finish up my PhD. Do you know what I went and got my degree in? Culinary arts.
There you go. That's a skill you can always use, right?
Yep. Just thought it was kind of funny. I got a master's degree in business, and so I decided I'd go to cooking school.
Good for you.
Learned a lot. Get to use it a lot. Patty went with me. But so you had an influence. You got somebody else to become a cook, huh?
That's what I'm talking about.
So the next question, what is the one leadership lesson learned that you learned the hard way that you don't want a soldier to learn the hard way?
Never be too quick to pass judgment. Now, let me give you an example. And this goes back to a very bad incident during my time at Fort Dix, New Jersey at a readiness group. Um, there was an incident that happened that involved a coworker, and um, and I don't want to make this. It sounds. I guess you got to understand it all to understand why I say don't don't be too quick to pass judgment. This man had taken his life, and I found his vehicle, and I brought his vehicle with his daughter home. Didn't find him at the time, but it was dark. But the next day, obviously, we called the MPs in that, and get a young staff sergeant comes up there. I was a sergeant first class. He's with the criminal investigation division, right? And he says, "Well, we'll go out to where the van was." And I said, "I'll take you out. I'm the one that found the van, right?" He says, "Well, I'm going to bring the daughter." I said, "No, don't bring the daughter." Right. And I was very adamant about that. But his investigation, right. So we bring her out there. Well, unfortunately, we found what we found. Right. And I immediately disliked this person. Right. This agent. Right. Immediately. I was that angry with this individual that my judgment of him as a soldier and as an officer was, it was the worst, right? I never said it verbally, but I thought it, right? That what kind of a despicable human being could you be to make that the last memory in his daughter's mind, right? To see her father like that. So fast forward, right? A couple of years, right? I'm in Germany now, and I'm now the first sergeant of the unit in Nuremberg. Well, guess who gets assigned to my company? This same individual, this MP that was, I guess, worked for CID. So he comes in to the office, and as soon as I seen him, I told him, I said, "You will not investigate one thing in this command as long as I'm the first sergeant." "Well, you can't do that." "Oh, yes, I can." Right? And you won't. Right? Well, of course, that prompted his leadership to want to come over and talk to me, and I laid out the story as to why I felt that way, right? That he didn't want to listen. He didn't want to take into account of what we may find out there. He didn't want to take into account the impact it would have on that family member. He ignored everything. He ignored the fact that I'm the one that found the van, that I'm the one that could take him out there and show him exactly where it was, right? So now as a senior leader, the first sergeant here, right now, I kind of, the shoe's on the other foot, right?
Yeah.
I'm the one in charge, right? And I was going to basically bench this individual, right? I would do everything within my power to make sure he didn't do nothing but file paper for his entire time that he was going to be in that unit, right? I had such a disdain that I never thought I could have for anybody, which I'm not proud to say, right? Because of that incident, right? It had that of a profound impact on me that I focused all my energy on that young man, right? And not that I did anything immoral. I didn't do anything unethical, and I didn't, I didn't, well, you could say maybe it was unethical, pass a kind of a judgment on him, right? Looking back, maybe it was, right? But I did not want him doing anything. Now, I didn't go over there daily. I didn't harass him. In fact, he wasn't even on my mind, right? The only thing that was on my mind was I better not see him in anything that I'm involved with, right? Well, after about, I don't know, a year of him being in the union, no, I don't think it was a year. It might have been 6 to 8 months. His leadership came over and talked to me. And they told me, they sat me down and they said, you've really gotten this guy's head, right? That he is now thinking that he is not qualified. My immediate reaction was a knee-jerk reaction. He would be right. He is not qualified. Right? And they looked at me, they said, all right, First Sergeant, I understand really after you explain why you would go there. I said, listen, I've not said maybe, half a dozen words to that man since he's come here, right? I said, so, and all my dealings with him have been professional, right? I've never done anything that I could think of, and I truly felt that way, right? But it's what you don't do, not necessarily what you do.
Right.
Right. And so I had to, I really had to, I mean, I had a dilemma. I really did. And I had a challenge of how am I ever going to overcome this as a leader now that this individual is in my unit? I need to get past this, right? Because if I am in any way messing with this kid's mind by what I'm not doing, then I need to stop doing that, right? And so I kind of put all that in the back burner, called him in, and I sat down and I talked to him and I said, I don't think I ever really gave it a thought of what you were going through, right? Your thought process, why you felt I never asked, didn't care, didn't want to know, right? In my mind, it was wrong. And I said, then again, you and I have never really talked about what I was feeling, right? This was a very close friend of mine, right? And his family, and, and she didn't need to go through all that, and you had the power to stop it, and you didn't do it, right? I said, so we need to get past this. And I actually, I told him, I said, listen, I think I owe you an apology, right? As a leader, I should have not, that's not the kind of welcome to Germany you should have gotten, right? And despite how I felt, that was a personal feeling that I let get in the way of my professional, right? And I said, so I have a regret for that, right? And I don't think I handled that quite right. When you walked into my office, the first thing that came into my mind was his daughter's scream. Not you, not anything else, not what you do, but that, and I immediately shut down and made the decision you weren't going to do anything as long as I was sitting in the seat. And that was not the right thing to do. So I was faced with probably one of the biggest leadership dilemmas, that I had prior to that and since then, right? That I let my personal emotions get way ahead of my professional, right? And I had to really nip that in the bud. It was a very challenging thing to do, but it was the right thing to do. I had to get over that, and it was a very hard thing to get over. And he had to get past the fact that, he had to stop second guessing himself, right? I mean, I'm sure all the decisions that he made at the time were probably right by the book, right? And, but I didn't care about that book, right? And so I think he had to better understand that and take it upon himself to forgive, if there was anything to forgive, or if he felt anything he had to forgive in himself, was that he felt he did the right thing, right? And his actions were justified, and he, it was their vehicle, not mine, even though I was the one that found it, it was still their vehicle, right? So I would share with you that I wouldn't want anybody to go through that, right? I mean, I would not want any young leader to struggle with that. And then one, let it weigh on them as much as I let it weigh on me, right? This guy was a very good friend. A good friend, right? And he had a good family. And for whatever reason, he decided time was up, right? And so just the mere thought of this guy making that decision to take the daughter out there, I just couldn't fathom. I just couldn't understand. Couldn't get my brain wrapped around that, right? And I really let it affect me as far as he was concerned. Not anything else, just as far as he was concerned. And I let it consume me, I'll be honest with you. And so when he walked in, all that come flooding back, Mark, like it was yesterday. And as much as I may have held my composure, I made it very clear that he wasn't going to do anything but file paper, right? And whatever I could do, I was going to make that happen, which was wrong. I should have never have done that. So that was probably the biggest challenge that I think I ever faced as a leader, is I had, no matter how close I was to it, and probably the fact that I was too close to it, I should have removed myself from that situation altogether. And instead, I just plunged in head first. And I shouldn't have done that because I let it affect me, right? Not with anything else.
Right.
Just with this one individual, right? So I would submit to you that that's not something I would want to ever struggle with again, nor would I want anybody out there to have to struggle with. So if you could take anything away from that is, you can't let your personal emotions, which we all know, right? We preach it all the time, right? You can't let your personal feelings affect your professional responsibilities. And boy, did I let it.
Well, I think that goes back to we're all human. And
Yeah.
one of the things I learned as a first sergeant, kind of like what you're talking about, is I did not realize the impact of my personality and my leadership style on young soldiers. As a first sergeant, you're pretty much the king of the mountain.
Yeah.
And when you don't say something or you say something pretty caustic, they walk away going, Top's gonna get me.
Oh,
Not that it was just a lesson learned. So yeah, I think we all learn that kind of lesson because we've allowed our emotions to get out in front of us. The key is, did we do the right thing and not do anything illegal, unethical, immoral, and unsafe? And if we followed that and we made amends, it's a lesson learned that we can help soldiers with in the future.
Yeah, I was very careful in, one, I didn't want to see him in the first place. So it wasn't like I made a daily stop at his office to make sure that he was not out and about somewhere, right? And make my presence known. I didn't do that, right? I just stayed away, right? And interacted when needed, interact, and I kept that professional. But I also made sure that whenever an incident happened, I made the phone call and said, I better not see him over there, right? So it was, and I let that go on too long, right? And so I had to really step back and take a look at myself. That was probably one of the toughest leadership challenges I think I ever faced. And would never want to face it again, right? I don't think I'd ever want to put one of the soldiers through that, nor myself through that, right? Because I think I brought part of that home sometimes, right? I was like, I can't believe out of all the luck I get this guy. Is it good luck or is it bad luck, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? Is it just my luck I got him and his bad luck? It was, you those things go through your mind. And so I think that was probably the toughest one that I ever had to overcome, right? I had to get past that. There was just no two ways about it. I had to. I often thank God that I wasn't in his rating chain, right? Because I'm not sure what I would have done. I like to think that my professionalism, if I was, that I wouldn't have looked for something that wasn't there. But at my current mindset at the time, I don't know. And it's not, and it's something I'm happy I don't have to struggle with, because I wasn't.
But it takes a strong leader to recognize that too.
Yeah. And I finally got past it. We made what amends we could make, right? And I later found out, I think he ended up going on to make Master Sergeant, I believe, and he retired. So I felt good at the fact that I didn't hold that up, right? And I honestly didn't know how long he'd been a staff sergeant when he got that case. To be quite honest with you, I didn't ask. Was he newly promoted? Been there for a long, long time? First big case like this, right? I didn't ask all those questions, right? I didn't dig into that. And so it's kind of a regret and a leadership challenge at the same time.
Yep. All right, we're going to start wrapping up. Is there anything you want to share with the team before we close out today?
Well, we can go back to the original thing, right? Bloom where you're planted.
Yep.
We all now, especially, when I was in the G4, I went over to the theater a couple times, and I would talk to anybody in the logistics world, not just cooks, but anybody. And you come to find out that they're all doing something differently. They're not doing their MLS. You go up to a fuel guy and say, "Hey, did you set up this fuel farm?" "No." "You know how to set up one?" "No." It contracted out, right? He's just out there as a quality and control guy. And all had those concerns about getting promoted, and is this going to be a detriment to my career? So Mark here, bloom where he's planted, and now look at him, right? He's got his own company. He's the CEO. He's a culinarian, right? He's done quite well for himself, and I'm very proud of him, right? So when you look at yourselves, and maybe you're in a job that you're not thrilled with, but it's where the Army needs you, bloom where you're planted, right? Be the best at whatever it is the Army has you doing. Give it your best. Give it 100%. And the Army's going to take care of you. I'm a firm believer in that, right? That the Army will look out after you if you're doing everything that you can do to be the best at what you're doing. If you don't know about it, read it. Read everything, right? One of the best mentors I ever had was a guy by the name of Matt Graves. And every time I got a question wrong, I owed him a 6-pack of Diet Coke. Right? He'd ask me a question about something in the food service field, whether it was from a TB medical point of view, to field feeding, to garrison operations. He'd ask me a question. They weren't easy ones. And if I missed it, he said, "That's a 6-pack. Right? And I would deliver. I went into this range room, eyes wide open, right? I can't tell you how many 6-packs of Diet Coke I bought, but I bought a lot. But I learned a lot. I learned to study and learn and understand everything about food service. And I did that in the same thing, and I took the same approach when I was pulled out of being a cook, right? Put into other jobs. I learned everything I could learn about it so I could be the best at it I could be. So I guess my last word would be, do your best at what you're doing. The Army needs you there, bloom where you're planted.
Well, it was some great advice for me, and I really appreciated it. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up, team. Hope you enjoyed this session with Command Sergeant Major Retired Welch. He is a great mentor, currently working soldier program, Sergeant Major?
Yeah, NCO and soldier programs for the Association of the United States Army. Yeah.
Doing an outstanding job there, helping our soldiers. And want you to stay tuned for the next session in Lessons Learned in Leadership. If you like what you saw today, go ahead, hit the subscribe button, leave us a like, a comment about today's session, or a subject you'd like to hear in the future. Until next time, stay safe and stay healthy.